Hello, everybody. So I hope that everyone has enjoyed Surat and that has gone well. It seems like for the most part it has. I know that there's been some trouble with the calendar, and John, who's one of our volunteers, sent me some information about that, which I haven't really gotten a chance to review, like how we could do that differently, because I've been trying to launch our next artist. But hopefully I'll look into that and get an update, and maybe we'll have a better way to do that, because I know a lot of people have been having trouble. But if you are, just continue to text me for now, and we'll work it out. But anyways, you guys are awesome. It seems like the first artist went really well, and so we are moving on to the next one, and it is Paul Klee, which is maybe not as much of a household name, but he is, I think, is very interesting. And I think the project will be fun because, of course, why would we do it if I didn't think it was a good project? So let's look at the slides. There we go. Here he is, Paul Klee. So here we're really transitioning. So with Surat, we talked a little bit about Impressionism and how you don't necessarily have to paint or draw something exactly the way it looks like a photograph, but you can do your impression of it. Or the artists would, you could tell that that was the Eiffel Tower in the Surat slides, but it was not really what the Eiffel Tower looked like, because they were using he was using color and the shape of the brushstrokes and things to show how he felt about it, and to try to get us to have a certain feeling when we saw that painting. So Klee is one of the early modern, what we would call modern painters, who took it to the next step of, you know what, I'm not even going to really try to portray what I see there. We're just going to do shapes. And he was just like, one of those people that's just so smart that, like, I'm sure if I had ever tried to talk to him on the street, I'd have no idea what he was even saying. He was like a violin master at a young age, could have been a professional musician, but decided he wanted to do art. But like that knowledge of music comes into his art a lot. So let's look at some of his early paintings. So I think it'll be interesting to see that these are different than maybe things they've seen in the past. And one thing to note is not just like the blurriness of the lines, where he's kind of, that's what he's blurring reality between fantasy and reality is something that he did. But also just that they're very drab, because Klee, when he went to art school, he felt like he did not know how to use color. He was like scared of using color. He didn't know how to use the right colors. So he would just do like gray and brown, and felt like he could never really be an artist because he couldn't master painting the quote unquote right colors. So interesting. Then he went in 1914 and took a trip to Africa and Tunis, which is in Northern Africa. I don't know exactly where that is, but he went there, and it was very bright and colorful. Oh, Tunisia. Okay. No, yeah. And just for whatever, he had an epiphany moment and was like, aha, like, I can capture these colors. I feel like I can paint and color now. And what he did, instead of drawing like what he actually saw, this one is called Tunisian Gardens, but obviously not really what we would normally see of a picture of a garden. He tried to capture the light and the colors that he saw, but not necessarily the actual shapes and images. And so this was revolutionary at the time. And you see that he started to use just circles, squares, rectangles as his building blocks for his paintings. More geometric shapes than organic shapes. And if kids don't know what that is, you just briefly talk about how an organic shape is just something you would see in nature, maybe like a leaf petal or a wave. Okay, so an interesting thing was that I'm not sure how to say this other painting, and the style of Kerawan. Don't quote me on that. But anyways, the interesting thing I thought about what he said of why he was drawing what we now call abstractions or abstract painting was that at this time, this was around when like World War I would be getting started. He lived until the start of World War II. And he felt like many modernists felt like this beginning of the 20th century was just a dark and terrible time in history. And he thought that the artist's job was not to portray that because it's not beautiful what he saw around him. He was living in, Europe, war-torn Europe. And so he thought that his job as an artist was to try to find like an alternate reality, an alternate beauty, rather than painting the beauty that is in the world, which is what has traditionally been done. He was looking for alternate realities. So this next one is one of his most famous Ad Parnassum. And you can see it's inspired by Seurat, which is why we did Seurat before Klee, because it's made of, they're kind of like rectangular dots, but it definitely has the dot thing going on. Definitely would fall into the pointillism category. So when he made this work, he was on a high. He was doing thousands of works of art. But this is about the time when the Nazis were coming into power, and they did not like him. So they put a kind of a cramp in his step, called him a degenerate artist, and tried to take away all his artwork. So he fled to Switzerland and was able to still create his artwork. But that obviously just added to his, not liking what was going on in the actual world around him. And interesting to note, he created over 9,000 pieces of art, and he did so many different types of media. What I list here: oil paint, watercolors, ink, pastels, etchings. He would draw on all kinds of things: metal, fabric, newspaper. So he could do it all, which I think is just interesting. So, and talk a little bit more about color, because he was big on color. So he's playing with complementary colors, excuse me, which maybe we touched on last time. But you can take out that color wheel poster that we have and tell them like a trick to remembering: complementary colors, green and red for Christmas, purple and yellow like a wizard's hat with like the stars on it, blue and orange like a goldfish swimming in water. But the thing about complementary colors, perhaps why Klee liked them, is because they make things pop when they're right next to each other. It really, it's almost jarring to the eye because they're on opposite ends of the color wheel on the spectrum. They don't flow together. They don't blend together. They really like create a sharp contrast, which would show his building blocks. So instead of, a lot of times, an artist would be considered great if you look at that painting and you're just, enveloped in the painting as just like the work of art, and you're not really thinking as much about what is the artist trying to communicate here. In like more classical paintings, you're more thinking about the image. For him, he wanted you to be thinking about the artist and being really like, what on earth is this? What is this artist showing me? To be very aware of, oh, this painting is made out of a bunch of rectangles. Why did the artist put the rectangles, in this particular manner? So it's much more meta, like aware of itself, than art had previously been. Then a representational painting. His was very much focusing on, okay, someone's trying to send me a message. How do we decode this? Man. Of course, when I'm doing this, all of a sudden I like can't talk and have a scratchy throat. Okay, so here's talk a little bit about cool and warm colors like we did last time. That he would often do paintings that were primarily one or the other. You can see in this Fire Evening one, He has like the orange, which is complementary to the blue. And that really pops when you have those like squares of orange in the middle there. The interesting thing, so Klee decided, okay, I'm just going to use these shapes as building blocks. I'm not going to try to draw representational or paint representational things. So the question was then, how do I decide what colors to use? Because when you look at a red rose, then you're going to use red to paint it. But if you're trying to like uncover an alternate reality or express your ideas geometrically, there's not necessarily a color that you have to use to do that. So he decided, drawing on like his musical abilities, that he would just try to create color harmony, or sometimes disharmony, cacophony. Just like in music, like, so that's what he was thinking. Complementary and contrasting colors became really big for him in deciding what colors he was going to use. So let's look at the next one. Another thing that he did that's really interesting, he would do these line drawings with very simple lines. He really admired the art of like super young kids who are not trying to imitate yet, but are just, just putting it on the page without thinking that they have to do it like anybody else or that this is a certain way you do it. He wanted to capture that just simplicity of a young child drawing in his artwork. Because think again, he's trying to create a reality that is more peaceful, more pure than what he's seeing in the world at that time. So it makes sense that like the purity of a child's drawing would really appeal to him. And again, we see like red and green, complementary colors, or the warm colors in Park Belu. Here's another example of a single line drawing. He starts, well, I guess he could have started at her neck or at her nose, I don't know, and then follows the line all the way around without really breaking it. And that is also an innovative, different thing that he did. If any of you were helping last year, you could see that in Calder. He would have been inspired by these ideas. So this is the one we're going to try to emulate, which is funny. I see the irony because Klee did not, he liked that kids weren't trying to copy. And so now we're trying to have the kids copy Klee. I apologize for the hypocrisy of what we're doing, or that he wouldn't like that. But we're going to go ahead and do it anyways, because I think it's just good for kids to have access to art and to try new things. And whether Klee would like that or not, I'm sorry. Okay. So you see the bright colors here. You see that's made of triangles and rectangles and all this geometric shapes. So we're going to do something similar to this. And if I can stop coughing, I will tell you about the project. So let me stop sharing this. See if I can find, here I am. Okay, so we are going to do something like this. A colorful Klee castle of our own. And whether they want to have the sun like in Klee's drawing, they can decide. So simple for us, fun for them is always my goal. So we have this paper, which some of you may remember we used for a project last year. It's very thick because oil pastels on thin paper can be a disaster. So we have this thick paper. And so basically what they're going to need, this is for older kids. We use this thick paper. They can have a ruler if they want, although you don't necessarily have to use a ruler. They're going to want to draw in pencil first, the outline of their castle and the shapes inside. And then fill it with bright colors from our oil pastels. Encourage them to use contrasting complementary colors, but really they can do what they want. So fill it in with the bright colors as they wish, whatever pattern or design they want. Then they're going to want to go over the outline of the image with the black oil pastel. Don't do the outline in black before the color because it will smear, which on one of my examples you can see I didn't figure that out right away. So pencil first, and I got little pencil sharpeners so that we don't have to sharpen the pencils. They can just sharpen their own if their pencil is not sharp like they want it. And so plan the shapes and everything, do it in pencil, then do their colors, contrast and complementary, bright colors. They can color the sky if they want. They don't have to. Then go outline it in black. It's going to make it look much more crisp and just show the distinction between the colors better. That's basically it. I didn't do it on this, but you can put the labels straight on here. So I would encourage you to prep by putting the labels that say this is Klee, this is inspired by Klee and who he is on the bottom. And that will just kind of shift their picture up. But these pages are big. They have plenty of room. And then you don't have to mount it, which I think is great because if we can eliminate a step, why not? So for the younger kids, because I think that for kindergarten first, maybe second, you might know your class a little better now, what would work best for them if you have a second grade class. I think it would be harder to draw all those shapes, either with a ruler or not. So I have these that are on like a thicker paper, and it's an outline already for them. So they could do more shapes in here if they wanted, like make this triangles or diamonds or. So they could make it more the way they want. But then for those younger kids, like kindergartners especially, they can just focus on doing the colors. And I think that will be enough. Even like outlining it might be a little hard for them. I'm not sure. We'll just see how long it takes them to color it, and you can go from there. And they can add a sun if they want to really copy Klee's castle and sun idea. So that's basically it. For this one, you would still mount it, but you could just do it that same day because it doesn't have to dry or anything. So the one thing, I think the only caution really is that when you have oil pastels, they are messy. They can bleed into each other. So, just caution the kids to you don't have to layer it on too thick to get the bold color. If you have too much on there, they're going to bleed into each other, which is good for some projects. But for this, I think I just like that the oil pastel gives such a bold color, and it's fun for them. It's different than crayons or pens or what they usually use. But we're not using it in the way you can, obviously they're used to blend, but that's not really what Klee would do. So we're not using it for that particular purpose this time. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. I think that going forward, I'm not going to stock the art cart because it costs a lot more to have the supplies for the room and the cart. And people, I don't think, are going to be using the cart that much. If you want to use it, we can arrange to take some supplies from the art room and put them on the cart for you for that day. And that's because I think that's probably only going to be maybe 2 or 3 people that would choose to do that. It just doesn't make sense for me to buy double the supplies because the pastels are expensive. The paper is expensive. So that is the plan. Hopefully that gives you some information about Klee. It's funny because he's not super famous like Van Gogh. And I was looking at a bunch of his paintings and I was like, oh, this one is really cool. I haven't seen this one before. And I was seeing if I could find a print of it. Lo and behold, I could get a pair of pajama pants with that painting on it. So I guess he's famous enough for that. I think whoever's managing his estate should not be doing that, but that's my personal opinion. Anyways, I hope it'll be fun to teach the kids a little bit about him and appreciate how he transitioned from that impressionist art to more modern experimental art, and to give them a hand at doing that. And using the oil pastels is fun, and minimal supplies, straightforward. I hope we will all love it. And we got these cool oil pastels, and there's some other oil pastels in there. There's a bunch, but I got these are the new ones. Hopefully they'll be like neat to put away, because always the problem with oil pastels is the mess. Anyways, enough of me blabbing. Thank you for all you do. Let me know if you have any questions.